All right, here we go. Today is September 18th, 2025, and I have Rose Ellen Fairgrieve from Fairgrieve Law Office today on the Golden Hour. I'm really excited to connect with her and learn more about employment law, how to protect your business, all of those crazy things. Today, we're going to talk about in a gig economy, employee or contractor in California addressing business owner concerns. So a little bit about Rose Ellen. She's been in the legal field or employment law for 30 years, and she's had her own law firm for 12 years. She's won over 25 trials and appeals. She's secured major settlements for business owners in California, and she's dismissed numerous employee claims outright, saving employers time and money, and I'm sure a lot of stress, pressure, and even the business, right? So, with that being said, would you like to introduce yourself,
Sure.
Rosalind, and we can jump
Thanks,
in?
Lainey. I'm happy to be here and happy to be chatting today. Rosella Fairgrieve. And as you said, I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've been doing exclusively employment for about 19 of those years. I'm geographically in San Francisco. I'm in the West Portal neighborhood of San Francisco. Yeah, so I'm just happy to be chatting today.
Yeah, me too. And I think this subject is relevant today because workers are everywhere, right? COVID really moved everybody all over, right? And I remember, we used to like hide that we had a developer in Kentucky or a copywriter in wherever, but now it's like part of the conversation. It keeps business interesting to have contractors all over and stuff. So I think what you're sharing is really relevant today. So before we jump into some great questions, we want to get to know you a little bit deeper. It's kind of fun to get to know you. So we're going to do a lightning round, but it doesn't have to be too fast. I don't want to stress us out. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions here. How many questions? We have like 10 questions, 7 questions.
All
Here's
right.
the first one. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
All right. I would say really showing up. Building relationships is so important. And you do that by being there, by being present. And, sometimes you don't always feel like getting out if it's pre-COVID times and less so now, or, getting in meetings. But really that's how people get to know you. That's how you get to know other people. And that's how I feel like I've built my business on building trusting relationships. And it's also very enjoyable too to get to know
Yeah,
others. So,
showing up for sure. What daily habit or ritual keeps you grounded? Because I know being a lawyer is very stressful at times.
yeah. And don't have a lot of time for daily rituals, but the one that I've kind of managed to keep at least consistent is there's this YouTube 5-minute yoga practice. It's called Yoga with Bird. I can give a
Okay.
little shout out. And she has videos like from 5 minutes. I mean, she has longer videos too, but the reality is I'm looking for the 5 to 10 minute one. If that's all I have time to do, I at least can do that.
Nice.
And that is, obviously there's a lot more I try to do, but that's kind of the daily, at least I can make time for that.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Because if you can't make time for 5 minutes, then we got to revisit the whole thing, right? Because,
Exactly.
yeah, that's awesome. I love yoga so much.
Yeah.
Number three, what one book, podcast, or resource do you recommend to other business owners?
Well, specifically for business owners, I think that the most helpful one that I found is the E-Myth. And so there is one for law firms, but there's E-Myths for they have them for discrete businesses, and there's also just general, but just really it teaches you about the importance of systems and really how to build a business that supports your life and what are kind of the basics you need to put in place for building a business.
Yeah,
So
I love that book so much. That was a really transformational book in my maturation process.
yeah.
Okay, number four, what tool, app, or system do you rely on the most in business?
I mean, right now, I have to say it's Slack because communicating with the team, you like that one?
I
Is that
love
is
it.
that one of
I
yours?
love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just being able to have real-time communication. And yesterday we were working on a particular case that the whole team had to have a part of. And it was so great to say, okay, done with this now. Who's got this? And just really, especially in this day and age when we're not all in the same room, it is the closest one can come. And I'm sure, if you use Teams, I'm sure it's similar, but just having that ability to have real-time communication
I can
is
talk
is
so
key.
much about that, but I won't. But what I will say is that I'm so excited to hear you embrace that as an attorney because some law firms aren't on the leading edge in terms of communication or adapting to the younger generation or how they want to talk. And email is such a waste of time.
Oh my gosh. If I had to go in my email to see every message, the day would be much longer, let's
Yeah.
just say.
Or just formatting it makes me crazy. Okay, this is a good one. What's a lesson you learned the hard way but are grateful for?
Ugh, hard way. The importance on focusing on the financials. When you're a business
Hmm.
owner, I'm in law. I practice law because I'm passionate about it, and I think most lawyers, at least me, you feel like if you're a good lawyer, you're fine. That's all you need to do is be a good lawyer. And if you want to have a business, a law firm, that is a business, you've got to go way beyond that. And so it really wasn't until I started really learning about budgets and finances and really getting into the weeds of it that my business became profitable.
I love that.
So,
I
yeah.
love that. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? So fun.
This probably goes back to my first one is it's really taking the time to focus on building relationships, kind of where I am. I think I wanted to be a lawyer since I was very, very young. And so I was very just focused on that path and didn't really take the time to stop and just appreciate, the college experience and just really focusing more on the relationships as I was going along.
I understand. I understand. You're laser beam focused. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last one before we jump into a gig economy employee or contractor in California. What's the most rewarding part of the work you do today, Rosellen?
The most rewarding aspect of my job is really working with business owners,
Yeah,
most of the time small business owners, and really empowering them in the employment relationship. To have a growing, thriving business, you have to have employees. And I hear time and again that people are too scared to hire, or, it's so hard to have employees, and I can help that. And I do. That is the work we do, is really helping employers feel like they can have employees to help grow their business. And so I love that.
I love that too. It was really great. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Now let's jump into the topic today in a gig economy, employee or contractor.
Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about why you're qualified to address. I mean, you're an employer attorney and like your 12 years of having your own law firm, 30 years of being in practice, but specifically share some reasons why you're qualified for this type of work.
Well, with this in particular, honestly, knowing the law and working with businesses day to day, for as long as I have, that's what is really important. I think an important aspect of my experience is that I have had the experience of litigating these cases. And that means when you say litigation, that means I am going to court to defend employers. And what that enables me to do is have 2020 hindsight. So now when I'm on the front end advising an employer on what they should do and why and how they should document it, it's because I've seen what happens if it isn't done right. And, I think a lot about when I have to defend a case, I think a lot about, well, what could the employer have done to not be in the situation where they're having to defend themselves, where they're having to go to court and having to spend the resources that way. So that's the lens that I bring to my preventative advice and counsel.
That's the great data around having the experience is that you've seen it happen before and you don't need to, you just know it's like a reaction. You're like, that causes this. Like you play the tape, this does that, does this. So we're not even, so that's why 30 years is better than one.
Well, and when I'm giving advice, I really am picturing myself in front
Yeah.
of a judge or a jury and saying, what is the one piece of paper that would have been better to have in this situation? Or what do I want to have documented and have the employer have done in
Yeah.
order to establish that they took the right action
Yeah.
and did things correctly?
Because litigation, going to court is expensive,
Oh, so expensive.
so
It really
expensive.
is.
And no one's like, yay, I want to go to court unless they're really rich and crazy, which there's a lot of those people.
There are some, there are some
Yeah.
people take it as a sport. I don't know.
Yeah. Emotions make, money, litigation. And I think too, you have to be a little tiny bit crazy to start your own business because it is a monumental shift. And so people that own businesses are passionate, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
that population in general is kind of crazy because you got to be crazy to start your own business. So
Yeah, you've got to be passionate about something, right? That you
yeah,
care enough about to do that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I love that. So opening up the conversation here, California is known for a lot of things, especially right now. There's a lot of stuff happening. Bay Area, San Francisco is known for a lot of things. Why is the employee versus the contractor question so important in California? Like, tell us why that's a big deal.
Well, I think one answer is it's the gig economy, right? Businesses, not just gig, not just in the gig economy, but businesses can, especially when they're starting out, stay nimble, maybe offer services that are a little bit beyond what their scope might be otherwise by using contractors. A lot of small business and entrepreneurs have established and built their business by utilizing contractors. And so they have been traditionally important to the functioning of business.
Right.
On the other hand, the laws have it's been become more difficult to classify people as contractors.
Mm,
So I would say that in California, the law kind of always has leaned toward if somebody is doing work for you, they're your employee.
mhm.
But in relatively recent years, the the California courts have established a more strict test that makes it even harder to correctly or properly classify someone as a contractor.
Mhm.
So I do have I think this is an important starting point. If
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
I'll share. We're going to get a little bit into legalese here,
Yeah.
but I
It's
think it's
important.
important to understand the context that we're in.
Okay.
So, the law defines who can be a contractor. A lot of people say, but I want to hire a contractor and the person working for me wants to be a contractor because they don't want to have to only answer to me. And so we sort of feel like, well, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, so we should be able to do what we want, but not so much. So the rule that was established in California courts is the three-prong test. We call
Yeah.
it the ABC test because as you can see, there's A, B, and C. So basically, if the worker does not meet all three of these criteria, then they can't be classified as an independent contractor. And so the first is that the worker is free from the control and direction of the employer. That's a typical one we've thought, people who have thought about what a contractor is, that's not going to come as a big surprise. The second prong, this is where I think a lot of people who used to want to classify people as contractors really get held up, is that the work that the person working, the work they're doing is outside the usual course of the business. And so this means, for example, if you have a graphic design company and you have somebody doing graphic design on a contract basis, well, they're doing the work that you're in business to do. But if you're a graphic design company and you're hiring a contractor to do your bookkeeping, you're not in business to do bookkeeping services, so that's going to meet this test. And then third, the worker has an established trade of the work being performed. So here it means that they're doing this for you and they're doing it for other people, and this is what they do. And so when you get into, oh, well, I have a contractor, but they work for me 30 or 40 hours a week, well, then this is not really their trade that they're doing for other people. They're just doing it for you. So those are the three prongs. And in terms of that's sort of the baseline test.
Right.
There are exceptions written into the rule for different scenarios, and we could do talk for a whole hour on just all the exceptions. So there are some discrete areas, and certainly if anybody out there has a business where they feel like, you know, they need to delve into this more deeply,
Yeah.
the labor code, the California Labor Code does spell out the various exceptions, like certain industries got accepted. And there is also what's called a business to business exception, where the, again, if the sort of worker meets a certain set of criteria,
Mhm.
then it can be okay. You know, if you think about if
Right.
you're a business owner, you want to hire another business
Hmm.
to do work, then there are certain criteria that can
Right.
fall under and then qualify.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Just because you're both like on the same page doesn't mean that the state is on it. So is it from different states have different rules? California has a rule, Oklahoma, that kind of thing.
Yes, there is a federal law governs this as well, although not as strictly. And but yes, you generally speaking, if a state has its own law on it, then that is what you're going to need to follow for the workers in that state. And, you know, we're not the first state to have the ABC test. You know, other states have it too. So,
And
uh,
I don't know if this is okay to say, but they want your person to be an employee so they get tax money, right?
they do get taxed, but yes, I think it does impact. I can't speak to why the legislature does what it does all the time, but that is a big difference is that yes, if the state were just filled with independent contractors, we would be short a lot from of
Tax.
funds, tax funds.
And
Yes.
yeah, paving our freeways. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. So can you walk us through like, and we don't need to get into it 'cause and I'll put in, more details in the show notes and we'll add it in, but can you walk us through a quick checklist of when it's okay to classify someone as a contractor? Like if they have a business license, you kind of just went over it, but maybe just shoot off a couple quick things.
Yeah, so if it's a business that you're hiring, I'll kind of rattle off the factors. It might be quick, and if you want me to
Okay.
pause on any of them or talk more about them, but again, you have the free from the control and direction of the contracting business, so they are responsible for the work they're doing. They're providing services to the business that is hiring them as opposed to the customers of the business that's hiring them.
Mhm.
So I guess in my graphic design example, perhaps you could hire a business who does graphic design, who meets all these qualifications
Mhm.
to help you, the business owner, but not to work directly with the
Mhm.
clients. There's a written contract. So that's another one that I think there's a lot of just handshake agreements out there that aren't in writing. And
Mhm.
not only does that make it problematic if there is a dispute down the road, but it's actually required to be in writing.
Mhm.
There is, the business that you're hiring has a business license, has registered, with tax registration, whatever
Mhm.
is required in the location that they're working. They, customarily engaged as an independent business, helping other businesses. So again,
Mhm.
they're offering their services to you and other people as well. provides its own tools, vehicles, equipment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wi-Fi, internet.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And they have the freedom to set their own hours
Yeah.
and location of work and that kind of thing. So it's really just, I need this by this time, and then they're off running and doing it as it suits them. And they have the ability to negotiate rates, which if you're negotiating a contract, that is what that is. That's that's what you're doing. You're negotiating rates. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Because it
yeah, those are the sort of the business to business factors that come into play.
seems like to that would all contracting life is great for, the digital nomad, right? Because they like to work when they like to work. They want to travel. They want to go places. They don't want to be tied down to going to places. So it's behooves a lot of young people to qualify as contractors because they like the lack of whatever,
Structure and
structure. Yeah.
required show up at this time, stay till
Yeah.
this time. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And then on the flip side, what's a top sign it's time to bring someone on as an employee? And I mean, I guess you could just say the opposite of what you just said, but like,
Yeah, and
well,
maybe we want to talk a little bit about what that means to
yeah,
bring
I think
someone on
so.
as an employee and
Yeah.
why this matters aside from the payroll tax question.
Yeah.
There are rights that employees have that contractors don't.
Okay.
And the state protects those rights. And so some of those rights are earning a minimum wage, which for a lot of contractors, that's not really an issue. A lot of, consultants, contractors, they're paid well, but, not always.
Not always. What about
And
construction or, labor stuff? Yeah.
right, if you're getting into just paying someone a flat rate,
Yeah.
then you don't know if they're, how long is it taking them? Are they even getting minimum wage? Are they getting overtime if they work more than 8 hours in a day or more than 40 hours in a week?
Right.
That's another right. Here in California, all workers are entitled to paid sick leave. Contractors are not. So that's another right that the state feels very strongly about protecting. And then there are all sorts of protections against discrimination, retaliation, protections for disabilities, protected leaves, so that if you have to take a leave for having a baby or because you are taking care of a family member or a whole host of reasons, then you're not going to lose your job. You will be guaranteed that your position will remain open for you to come back. So there are just a lot of protections that California has taken a lot of time and effort to put into place for employees. And, they don't want businesses getting around them by calling people contractors.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I love that. It's really not up to the business owner or the person. There's rules that you got to follow. So,
Yeah. But if I can add,
yeah.
I think there are some misconceptions about what it means to have an employee,
Right.
right? So for example, we were just talking about, oh, does the employer have to control the hours of work? If I hire someone, does that mean I have to give them
Mhm.
40 hours of work a week or
Yeah.
X number of,
Yes.
can I afford it? Right.
Yeah.
And the answer is really not necessarily. I mean,
Right.
you could, if the format of the relationship is working for both the worker and the business owner,
Hmm.
then you can set them up as an employee and keep some of the things that
Right.
you like about having them as a contractor.
Right.
I mean, yes, you have to go through the formalities, do it correctly, give them sick leave, there are costs to it, but if the reason that I do hear this is that people say, well, I can't afford an employee because, or I don't have 40 hours of work. And that's okay. People can be part-time employees, as needed employees. There's lots of different ways that the relationship can be
Right.
navigated. And that's what, I like to help
That's big.
businesses
That's really
in,
big. I
in those
I
situations.
I've told you my friend that owns a real estate company, he was hiring employees and we were on a hike and I said, "Well, how do you have 40 hours of work?" And he's like, she just because she's an employee doesn't mean that she's working 40 hours and she's hourly. I didn't know that you could be hourly and an employee. I was like, I thought that employee just meant you have to have 40 hours. So when he was telling we're on our hike and he's like, "Oh yeah, she's, hourly," that blew my mind. So yeah, one concern I hear is that if a business owner says, if I make someone an employee, I have to totally change the way that we work together, and that's not true.
It's not true.
Yeah,
No, no. You should do it correctly. You should figure
yeah.
out what, you should, you still need to dot the I's and cross the T's,
So
definitely. But
yeah, when we're talking about being a business owner, you got to be a little crazy, right? Because you're basically stepping into a role that you know nothing about. So we were talking about about
hmm
budgets, right? Like when you become an entrepreneur, it's not because you love just being a hairdresser or an attorney. You have to totally flip the whole thing because you're learning how to run a business. So you get
hmm
into it because you're passionate about the craft, but then you have to become the entrepreneur and run the business.
Yeah.
And this is part of that responsibility, right? Paying
Right.
taxes and all this kind of stuff. So the liabilities that businesses have when they're misclassified, why don't we scare people a little bit?
Oh, it
Disclaimer,
does get
disclaimer,
kind of
close your
scary.
eyes if you don't like
Yeah. La
blood.
la 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 la. Well, I guess we could start with those benefits of employment that I was just talking about. And
Yeah,
that's really the risk of misclassifying an employee is you're either they're not getting the benefits of employment or you're not documenting it well, the fact that they're getting the benefits of employment. Another one that I didn't mention, a requirement that I didn't mention that does come up a lot
yeah.
is the requirement that you give rest breaks and meal periods to your hourly employees. So if they work more than 5 hours in a shift, they're entitled to a 30-minute unpaid meal period. They're entitled to 10-minute rest breaks paid for every 4 hours-ish of work.
Mhm,
And so, you're just opening yourself up to claims that you
mhm,
didn't provide the meal and rest breaks, that you didn't pay overtime, that you didn't pay minimum wage, that
mhm,
you didn't provide sick leave.
mhm,
And those, having a claim brought,
mhm,
it can get expensive. And if it goes on a long time and you are not paying someone correctly, and you are, even if it's inadvertently violating the labor code and all the protections that of employment, one claim can be for a small business, it can be catastrophic. The
mhm,
cost of having to defend
mhm,
a, your business. The employment laws are very, very, very protective of employees.
mhm,
Employees are entitled to recover their attorney's fees for
mhm,
bringing cases against employers.
mhm.
And that means that if they have any success in any of their claims,
Yeah.
let's say they say you did five things wrong and really you only did one thing wrong, you're still going to be on the hook for their attorney's fees if that
Mhm,
case goes to court and you get a judgment against you.
mhm,
And the reverse is not true. If the
mhm,
employer wins on all five of those claims,
mhm,
the employee doesn't pay for the
mhm,
employer's attorney's fees.
mhm,
So at a minimum, the employer is always having to pay for defense counsel
mhm, mhm,
and and it's fairly low risk for the employee to bring a
mhm,
claim.
mhm.
It's the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Not to scare people, but that is a very good reason why it's important to make sure you're doing these things correctly.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. And I think you put that delicately, but also firmly. So I could feel it. So if a business owner is feeling overwhelmed and they don't know where to start and they're just, like if you've been programmed with fear for so long, it's a habit, right? And how do you break that? Like some people are scared of heights or some people are scared of cats or dogs, right? Like it takes a minute. So what's like one thing that someone can do if they're feeling overwhelmed to kind of get that momentum, like you said in the beginning, to show up appropriately in this? What could they do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first taking a step back is understanding why you have a business that you care about and you want to protect it. And so, just like, you've got to get computers set up to be able to do the work,
Mhm,
it's just part of enabling your business to
Mhm.
grow, because we can only do so much on our own, right? I mean,
Mhm.
at some point, if you really want to grow your business,
Mhm.
you do have to lean on others. So in terms of what's the first step? Is that your question?
Yeah. So, like, if someone's feeling overwhelmed, because sometimes when you're overwhelmed, like, you just don't do anything, right? You get stuck, inert, right? You
Hmm.
put it away. I think
Yeah.
when I first started my business, I was scared of taxes, right? So then I would wait to the end of the year to pay the taxes. And that's like horrible because instead of making the estimated or paying it over time, you have one chunk, and that would like put me into a tizzy. So, what's like a piece of advice to get people not to just to like maybe start the momentum of figuring this out? Because you can kind of once you start like once you're at the gym, you're like, oh, okay, I'm good,
Right.
right? It's
Yeah.
getting there.
Right. Well, I guess just educating yourself on, what the requirements are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we help a lot of first-time employers to
Hmm.
to walk through that because I think
Hmm.
you don't always know what you don't know.
Right.
And there's so much information out there. If you were to go to chat, for example, you don't necessarily know that you're getting all the right information because,
Right.
as we mentioned earlier, state laws are different.
Yep.
So it's going to depend on what state we're talking about. And
Hmm.
in California, local laws are different too. So San
Mm.
Francisco has its own set of labor laws that overlay California's laws. So, for example, sick leave, which we were just talking about, the
Yep.
California requirement is different than the San Francisco requirement. And
Wow.
so, you need to know that. So, I would say it probably, if you want to do it, I know there are a lot of people who are DIY.
Right.
So there's that, and you can do your research and you can go to the labor commissioners' websites, and there are resources out there, and you can figure it out. Or, you could go
Right.
to someone like myself or an HR consultant or someone who just has done this a lot of times and can set you up. And it might take a little bit of
Hmm.
resources on the front end, but at the end of the day, once you've done it once, now you know the things that
Yeah.
you need to know, and it's much easier to do it the next time and the next time. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how you could like legal Zoom this or DIY this. Like
Honestly, Lainey, I don't either, but I don't want to be here saying it's impossible because lots of people do it. But there's a whole host of issues that we didn't even begin to scratch the surface
yeah.
on. You mentioned about paying someone hourly versus salary,
Yeah.
and that's another area where people, if you do it wrong, can get you
Yeah.
into a lot of
Well,
potential risk. So I'm biased, but I do think it's worth
right.
the initial investment to get your employees set up correctly.
Yeah.
And then you can
Right.
cross that off your list. You can feel comfortable.
Yeah.
You have dotted the I's, you've crossed the T's,
Yeah.
you're getting the time record set correctly. You know what you need to know.
Yeah. The built like your business is like a house, right? And you want to lay the foundation. And this is one of those things. And a business really isn't a business without people in it. So they say if it's just you, it's a hobby. And if it doesn't have systems in it, it's just a hobby.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the main, I think, success points of a business is delegation, right? Because when you
Yes.
start out, you're like, I can do it. I want to save money. I can figure
Right.
it out. I'm scrappy. But that's not really a business. And the
Yeah.
people are the business.
Definitely.
There's so much to talk about with this subject, but we're just kind of keeping it high level. So, if you could leave our listeners with like one piece of advice about choosing between an employee or a contractor, or as an employer, really setting yourself up for success, like what would you leave the listener with one piece of advice?
I have so many. How do
Or
I
you could
choose?
say three. You could say three. How about three?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is just to reiterate, don't be scared to do it, to
Don't be
to hire an
scared.
employee. And part of the important focus for me is the value that you are providing when you are a business and you are providing employment to others. There is really, my view, a satisfaction, a gratification that a business owner gets out of that. And I love to see that in my clients. They really take that very
Mhm.
seriously. And sometimes it can be a little bit of an unexpected joy of, starting to build out your team. Not only are you doing it because it's good for your business, but also now you're providing opportunities to
Oh yeah.
others as well.
Oh
And
yeah.
you're providing opportunity for growth and learning. And I think if you see it from that perspective, honestly, I think it takes a little bit of the fear away because you get excited about it. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a reframe.
I love that. So, one piece of advice would be that, like, really valuing your staff, your people, and that hiring them as an employee or solidifying if they're a contractor is just like empowering your business and empowering them more. Because you are right.
Yeah.
I love working with my team. It's like one of my favorite things because it's an exchange of ideas and we're growing and learning. And to talk about what you previously said about relationship, right? Like
Yes.
everything is about relationships now.
Yeah.
And they're so wonderful, they're just, they can be so gratifying and growth and connecting. And, a lot of times too, now that we're all working from home, a lot of us are and not out as much and isolated or traveling, relationships are really important. So I like that reframe of like protecting the relationships maybe instead of being scared of the relationships. What else would you like to share with the listeners about advice choosing between employee or, empowering the employer?
Yeah. Well, obviously doing your due diligence. There are a lot of resources out there for what one needs to know for being an employer and following the law. And that is one thing that I think the state does well is there are, and I'm happy to send you some links that you could put in the show notes.
Okay.
There is a lot of information out there in terms
Yes.
of what to do, what not to do. And, I just want people to make sure they're going to the right sources. So, again, I can give you a resource list, but the state labor commissioner, the California Civil Rights Department, because there's just a lot of not right information. So as long as you're going to the sites for the agencies that are enforcing these laws, then you can rely on the information that's in those sites.
Yeah, I mean, that's why people hire you, right? Because you have the right stuff.
Yeah, I can shortcut it. I can say, I can ask the questions that are necessary to tailor the information to the business. So it just depends. Like if you need general information, that's great. But if you are trying to set up a particular relationship where this
Mhm.
person's going to be remote and this person,
Mhm.
then okay, you're going to have a remote worker, then you have to talk about, do you have to reimburse their expenses? What kind of leave are they going to get? So there are a lot of particulars about a business that do require personalizing the way that you're setting up the employment relationship.
Mhm.
So that's where we come in to help business owners figure that out.
Yeah, it seems like a great thing to get everybody on the same page,
Yeah. Yeah.
legal or not, right? Like claims or not. We talk a lot about setting expectations. The key is the key to a relationship with our clients.
Hmm.
So it seems like setting expectations with everything is just a smart thing to do.
Right. And certainly when you're entering into an employment relationship, you do have to answer those questions at the outset. You have to say, how much leave are we giving them? What are the rules?
Mhm.
And, a lot of times I do hear from business owners where we're trying to help them resolve a dispute and there's nothing in writing, well, how much vacation did you give them? I don't know. I told them I'd give them this. Well, where is there a document that shows that? And I think that the hard thing is when you're starting out an employment relationship, you're optimistic, you're hopeful,
Mhm.
you think this is a great person, you think
Mhm.
the fit is going to be fabulous. You don't always know how it's going to work out.
Mhm.
And so a lot of things are done
Mhm.
without specifying and delineating what are the terms and conditions that are governing this employment relationship. And that's important to do for protection of the business. And if you're going to go through the trouble of establishing a business and bringing in employees, it's worth the extra effort of making sure you're doing it right.
That's so interesting. Yeah. When I hear people say like, my family or my business is like my family, like I think, yeah, and like, how is that good? Like we
Yeah.
we just got off a call with our estate planning law firm client, estate litigation. And that's like crazy relationship time with money. So like when business
Yeah.
owners say we treat our employees like family, I'm like, do you hear that a lot? Like that's
I
not
hear that a lot. I get the spirit of it. The
you get
spirit
the spirit.
is
You're a good sport.
we
You're a
want
good
to
sport.
do right by our employees, but it shouldn't also mean we don't have the rules in writing.
Yeah.
You want to hope that you all get along well and that they appreciate the generosity that maybe you're going above and beyond as an employer for your employees, and that's all well and good, but these relationships sometimes do turn sour and for various reasons. If it's been kind of like, oh, we're just all going to get along and there aren't rules in place that are in writing, then yeah, that's when the business really is exposed and vulnerable. It's important to have it. I mean, that's great that you can sort of feel like your family, but you are still the employer, you are still the business owner. And, it's kind of like the hard lesson I learned of having to be focused on, to understand my books, right? Understand the financials. It's a business. It's a business. To be successful, you have to treat it with that level of seriousness. That's great if everybody gets along well and it's almost like a family, but really that's only after you've put the structure in place that
Mhm.
the business is protected and the rules have been communicated to the employee as far as what the terms of employment are at your business.
Mhm.
And it's something worth thinking about, putting
Right.
time and effort into.
Yep. I think that's great. Well, we're coming up on the end of the hour here. Is there any final notes? I really appreciate how you approach you're sensitive about it because like, people are afraid, but people are afraid of a lot of things. So when you anything's possible without fear. The fear is a real debilitator. So I appreciate how sensitive you are because not all law firms that do what you do are as sensitive. They're just like, here's the thing, and you got to do this. And I love it when people bring up the prongs. No one says the word prongs ever, except when they're talking about
Oh gosh, we
ABC.
say them like, yeah,
Like
right.
it's so funny. It's like, here's the prong conversation. Here we go. But I appreciate your sensitivity around the delivery of it because, that also is like a nice appetizer to it, to get someone started, and not feel so intimidated by the policies and the claims and the lawyer. I think your approachability takes away some of that fear.
Thank
So I
you.
appreciate that. So again, I'm so excited to have this. Is there any final thoughts that you would like to share before we say goodbye to everybody?
I just would say, it's not a topic that should be avoided. It's kind of like taxes. It's going to come around, and whether you do it early or at the last minute, and it's kind of similar, right? You're either going to set up your employees correct at the outset before you have any issues, or you could be forced to you if you don't dot the i's and cross the t's and you do have an employee that then comes after and tries to, and either you didn't do things correctly and so they want to be that situation to be remedied, or they know that you're vulnerable because you don't have the documentation and they know that they would have success with an employment claim. I would say it's not an area to be avoided is what
Yeah,
uh,
I
that
agree
would be
with
my.
you. And I think too, there's so much that we didn't uncover with stuff. So if anybody wants to leave in the comments something that you would like to learn about specifically, maybe we could do another micro topic around hourly as an employee, or what is it? What's the, how do you set it up? Where to get started? Because I think a lot of people are overwhelmed. What's the minimum amount of stuff that you have to do versus like all of the things? So how do you
Right.
baby bite it or whatever. So let's see what comments people leave in the show notes. I would be excited to hear about that. If you're an employer and you haven't classified your staff appropriately, contractor versus employee, then you're opening up yourself to some claims and something. And like I said before, we're business owners are passionate. We love what we do. So this is an investment in protecting what you love, because your business is your baby. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you joining me today, Rose Ellen, on
Thank you
this
for the
golden
invitation.
hour. And thank you so much for all your insights, keeping it light as possible, keeping it approachable on such a serious and important topic. With that being said, we'll catch you on the flip side. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.